said that she had quit her job in Seoul in order to attend the Costa retrospective and the masterclass. And she asked what she should do next, and we couldn't really answer that. But to me, this is we should give the audience the tools to do that, to quit their jobs, and so that they can devote themselves to cinema.
But then the big question, of course, is how are we going to do it? And how are we doing it?
Couldn't she just take a holiday? I mean, how long was this retrospective? I know he's made some long films, but...
I think it was, you know, the whole package was like the radicalism of just breaking off your contact with one world in order to go to this other. It's true, she could have...
But, I mean, I worked in horse racing for 15 years until 2 weeks ago, and I
he lost all his money.
Yeah, I lost all my money, and then I backed Andy Murray to win in straight sets, so that was a bad one. Yeah, so I mean, for 15 years I tried to balance film and kind of the world, the real world, everything else apart from film. And now I'm trying to kind of just be films. And it'd be interesting to see how it goes, because I think it is important to watch as many films as you can, but not to the point that it gets out of hand. I mean, you know, there's the British magazine Empire, which the strapline was, "You've been watching too many movies." And there's an American film critic, Mike D'Angelo, whose website is called The Man Who Viewed Too Much. And there's this whole idea of being a cinephage as opposed to a cinephile. And a cinephage just wants to eat cinema and see as many films as they can. And to me, it's great that people will quit their job for a Pedro Costa retrospective, but I hope that she, you know, doesn't spend the rest of her life sitting in a darkened cinema, because I think there's got to be in Britain we taught this, one of the catchphrases is life-work balance. But I think what we've got to get is a life-film balance, and the two things should really be illuminating each other. And I often think of film as being our other life. That's the way I kind of look at film. We have the life that we live, and then we have access to this whole other visual medium, which is a history now 100 years old.
Right. Well, you know what the tools that critics can, you know, give to readers and viewers is just the text, just good writing on film, and we don't have to be ambitious in a theoretical way as to, you know, the highfalutin concept that we're devoted to or anything. It's just a good piece on a film is already a tool that will help somebody see, well, it's possible to see film in this way, to devote yourself to film in this way, because, you know, a good piece of writing on film to me is a devotional piece very often, in some sense, you know.
Maybe something I could throw in here, because I sort of feel there's a very particular context kind of framing this whole panel today, which is to do with the fact that there's been for a whole bunch of years, you know, at least 10, 15 years now, critics like most of us here and some of you there have been sort of fighting for a certain kind of cinema, and it's the kind of names that you were mentioning, Christina: Love Diaz, Bellatar, you know, Pedro Costa, you know, many of these filmmakers who, in my country, these are the filmmakers whose films do not get shown in art house cinemas, right? They are not released commercially, and that's true of many countries of the world. That, you know, it will be the King's Speech that gets art house play in Australia, and Beautiful will get art house play, but Kiarostami cannot get a release, you know, in my country, right? So we've been fighting like hell, like for, you know, 15, 20 years for these films to be kind of recognised, to be seen, you know, to make a noise about these films. To the point where, when Apichatpong, who's another one of these filmmakers, when he won the prize at Cannes, it was like our victory. It was like our birthday, right? It was like, we won. Like, the guy, he got the prize, and he got the prize because of us, you know. We wrote him into existence, you know. You know, we yelled enough, and we screamed enough, and we agitated enough that somebody finally, a bunch of people on a jury, knew that they had to give that prize to Apichatpong because he's great. But what's interesting now is that there's a whole kickback now against us and against this whole position, right? And we're getting all of the Roger Eberts and everything in the world saying, oh, the Emperor's new clothes, you know, Apichatpong, Kiarostami. This is not the great old days of Ingmar Bergman. You know, something's lost now in modern cinema, the heart, the soul, the human nature, where is it? You know, and this is the point where I think we really have to do some new work, because it's not enough for us just to say anymore, hey, you got to pay attention to Apichat Pong. I mean, I agree with Chris. It's not a question of like trying to teach everybody, you know, trying to make people understand Apichat Pong, because I share your feeling, Chris, and in some ways I do think, well, if they don't get it, fuck them, you know, like if they don't understand it, that's their problem. You know, these films are so evidently great, or some of these films are so evidently great that they should come to the films. That's what we think, that's what we believe. But we are at an interesting point now where just to assert the greatness of this cinema is not enough. It's not enough to keep the traction going for this whole group of filmmakers, of course very much associated with the Rotterdam Film Festival, you know, and Rotterdam has done so much work, and, you know, magazines, CinemaScope, Rouge, Filmkrant have done so much work for these people, but now it's a whole question of how we keep that going.
Could I just say one thing about you're saying in Australia, Kiarostami and Apichat Pong wouldn't get even commercial distribution, not even like Melbourne and Sydney, would they not be shown? Well, to me that's suggesting that the wrong people are running the cinemas.
That's for sure.
And really, it's all very well us saying, you know, the top films of the year include Apichat Pong and whatever else it is. But, you know, we can knock on that door and keep saying these are the guys you should be showing. And yet if the cinema manager or the people who program the cinema just kind of go, well, we can fill the house with The King's Speech, followed by Black Swan, followed by something else. I mean, to what extent do film critics need to be kind of saying, this is a dysfunctional situation, it's badly out of sync? And like my local cinema, the Tyneside, is showing 127 Hours, The King's Speech, Black Swan, and they do show Apichat Pong, but it's upstairs in the small cinema. You know, and that's because if they want to show Black Swan, they've got to put it on for a fortnight in their biggest screen. Otherwise, the distributor doesn't give it to them. So it's the fault of the distributors, and it's the fault of the exhibitors. And we've got to be there saying, you know, and resisting the editor's urge to have a huge page on the big film of the week, which is just the one that's got the biggest advertising spend. And we've all seen it. And then that gets 3 stars. And then at the bottom, you get like a quarter of an inch to say, meanwhile, Kiarostami's new film is 5 stars. And you kind of think, well, shouldn't that be the one with the huge photograph? I mean, God's sake, it's got Juliette Binoche in it. You know, we can fill a page with her.
Well, we mentioned before that you know, Okay, anyway. So, you know, we mentioned before audiences, you know, maybe sometimes quit their jobs to go watch films, or, you know, to be able to attend a film festival or whatever. But how about, you know, film critics quitting their jobs? I think that would be a great, you know, solution to this problem of, you know, just this deluge of crap that we see in theaters all the time. I mean, you know, when was the last time a film critic just for, you know, for a daily newspaper just said, I'm sick of it, I'm not going to watch any more Hollywood studio films, and I don't give a shit what, you know, you're going to tell me tomorrow. But that doesn't happen ultimately because, you know, obviously a lot of our livelihoods depend on that. But then, you know, you have to go, so that's another way to go out of the comfort zone and just say, okay, I'm probably not going to eat very well for a while, but I can't watch this Hollywood crap anymore. It's already poisoning me. So it's kind of, yeah, I know you're going to have a response to that. Yeah.
Well, no, Yuri, who should be here, our Slovenian friend, he got a job writing for a mainstream Slovenian magazine, and he just trashed I mean, I'm not saying going to trash every Hollywood film, because Hollywood makes loads of great films. Some of my favorite films of the year.
Loads.
Yeah, loads of them. I mean, like, I would say Neville Dean Taylor. You know, I think they're fascinating filmmakers. Crank High Voltage was in my top 10 of the year, and they're not up there with Apichat Pong in most canons. But Yuri would just kind of, for paragraph after paragraph, excoriate and rip apart these kind of, you know, just Hollywood crap. And then I think he managed to get away with that for about 3 or 4 months. Then he got tired of doing it, and the editor said, look, you know, we're not going to sell much advertising here if you're going to say that every film that we're advertising is a worthless, steaming pile of ordure, or whatever it is in Slovenian.
But don't you think, and this is a question to you all, when you're doing that, which sounds great and daring and so on, and I think actually most film critics don't even have jobs, they're just freelance writers for newspapers, but when you're doing that, you're also losing your authority, and it's getting harder and harder to champion this other cinema. So what would be your response to that? And maybe you could also think of an example where you try to balance when you were kind of bashing a film, but at the same time trying to understand why people would like it and open doors to other ways of viewing.
Well, it's interesting that you just used the phrase that you lose our authority. Critics are losing their authority. And to me, I think it's a good thing for critics to lose their authority. I don't think critics deserve any authority, and it doesn't really help for critics to have authority. I mean, you know, this, by the way, this is when in America at least, the discourse about the decline of film criticism, and it's always about, you know, the fact that, you know, in 1969 when you had John Simon writing for X and Stanley Kaufman for X and Pauline Kael, and people were reading this, and that's the authority of critics, when, you know, when all of these New York weekly journalists were being read and stuff. And so this is what is always lamented by people who are lamenting the current state of film criticism, because all those people, if they're still alive, are being laid off or squeezed out and so forth and so on. But, you know, the authority that those people had, I don't think helped, you know, film criticism. It didn't help film culture. It was just, it was a manifestation of the fact that people cared about film. That's what gave those people their authority. What's important now is not for the critic to have authority, but for the critic to provide a model for an intelligent discourse on film, and let the, you know, if there are writers who are inspired to continue that, then they are the equal of the person who started it. It's not, you know, top down anymore.
Okay, so then I'm going to rephrase the word authority and say, like, how do you gain or maintain your trust with your readers?
By writing as well as you can, and being as interesting as you can, and constructing interesting ways of viewing films and putting it on paper. And if people like that, then that's good.
But I'm sure in newspaper writing there's more specific strategies to do that. Maybe Christina and Adrian would have some experience with that.
I just want to interrupt and say that nobody here knew what the transfunctioner was in Dude, Where's My Car? So where's the authority there? I mean, can I throw in another trivia question just for fun? Okay, John Wayne's Genghis Khan fights for the love of a Tartar princess in The Conqueror. What's the princess's name? A. Kumlek, B. Jamuga, C. Burtai, or D. Chepe? Okay, you guys have no authority. Okay, no authority whatsoever.
I think I ate.
What you said is correct.
I was eating Jamuga last night in the restaurant, so I don't think it's Jamuga.
Okay, well now, Gabe, I'm the man for you, because I quit my job as a newspaper film reviewer. Not because of like Hollywood crap, because I quite like Hollywood crap. But it was more because of these cultural things of like in the newspaper I wrote for in Melbourne. I and my co-reviewer, Philippa Hawker, a wonderful critic, we used to have like a special section where we could write about anything we wanted to, you know, a Kiarostami retrospective, or a director who just died, or, you know, an interesting actor, whatever, a genre, whatever. We had like a good half page, and a half page is a lot of space in a newspaper. And we did that every Wednesday, and it was like heaven. Like, we thought we were helping, you know, film culture. But then precisely the newspaper editors from on high came and said, we're not selling advertising. And in fact, all of the major film distributors threatened to pull their advertising. And they offered instead their free interview with, you know, Clint Eastwood and whatever to fill that space, and to get rid of, literally to get rid of this column. Which they like just couldn't see the point of wasting this space in the newspaper. So yeah, but I think really, and this is, you know, to you, Dana, I think we've got to forget about newspapers, honestly. I mean, the newspaper is truly a dying form. Like, I believe this, and particularly arts coverage in newspapers. That is not the main forum. Like, there were, yes, a few golden days where some interesting people, you know, Jonathan Rosenbaum,